Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we were discussing about different types of the filters, and finally, we have the signal detection and processing. Whatever the light signals that is generated as the particles pass through the laser beam in a fluid stream, it is converted to voltages by photodetectors. And there are two types of detectors. Number one, photodiodes, and number two, photomultiplier tubes. So these can be preferred based on the sensitivity of detection. And then additionally, the photocathodes of the photomultiplier tubes, they have the greater sensitivity as compared to the photodiodes, although they are known to convert light into photoelectrons in a more efficient way. The photocathodes of the photomultiplier tubes have greater sensitivity in comparison to the photodiodes. Even when it is known that they convert the light into photoelectrons in a more efficient way than the photomultiplier tube. Therefore, the photodiodes detect the stronger light signals which are generated by the forward scattering, whereas the photomultiplier tubes, they are commonly used to detect the weaker signals which are generated by side scattering and fluorescence. So there are two variations for the two detectors. Photodiodes detect the stronger light signals, while photomultiplier tubes, they are used to detect the weaker signals. Now the stronger light signals are generated by forward scattering, and weaker signals, they are generated by side scattering as well as fluorescence. So the light signals captured by photomultiplier tube or the photodiodes, they are converted into a proportional or a significant number of electrons to create an electrical current. Then the electrical current travels to the amplifier, where it is converted to a voltage pulse. So the maximum amount of scattering or the fluorescence, it is obtained as the particle is in the center of the beam. So that is very crucial to get the maximum amount of scattering or fluorescence. So it is possible when the particle is in the center of the beam. When the particle leaves the beam, then the pulse comes back down to the baseline. So you will have a signal for that particle as long as it is in the center of the beam. So once it leaves the beam, then automatically the pulse comes back down to the baseline. Then the analog signal that is measured as an analog quantity, it is generated after the conversion of the initial light signal into an electrical current by the detectors. Then after this, the electrical current is amplified by two types of amplifier. So these are number one, linear, and number two, logarithmic. Whatever the analog signal that is obtained, that must be converted into digital signal either by an analog to digital converters or by some computer programming for further processing. Then the signal becomes digital data, so that can be displayed as in the form of plots or the histograms. So the data, whatever the data that is obtained by using the amplifiers, that is the linear and logarithmic, it is exactly the same. That means the distributions look different based on the approach used to convert an analog signal into the digital data. And moreover, the dynamic range is another important parameter to choose either the linear amplification or the logarithmic amplification. So this is another important factor to be considered, the dynamic range. Linear amplification is used if a limited dynamic range is required. Say for example, in case of DNA analysis. On the other hand, logarithmic amplification is used if a much broader dynamic range is needed for analysis. Say for example, expression or the cell surface expression, that is cell surface marker expressions. So these two amplification types, they depend upon the dynamic range. So it is an important parameter to choose either linear amplification mode or the logarithmic amplification mode, because the linear or the logarithmic amplification are the types of the amplifier wherein the electric current is amplified. Right. So the linear amplification is used if a limited dynamic range is required, as in case of DNA analysis, wherein just two-fold difference in DNA content may be observed. And logarithmic amplification is used if a much broader dynamic range is needed, as in the case of the analysis of cell surface marker expressions. Right. So in the last session, I had mentioned that there are two different types of flow cytometry, and they are the non-sorting type and the sorting type. And I did mention that the non-sorting type can perform light scattering and fluorescence emission, while the sorting type has the ability to sort the particles. So in that context, we will discuss about the electrostatic cell sorting, because flow cytometry is about non-sorting as well as sorting type. So thus it becomes most essential to discuss about the electrostatic cell sorting. Now this electrostatic cell sorting is responsible for capturing and separation of the cells with predefined features. This has to be underlined. This particular cell sorting is responsible for capturing and separation of the cells with predefined features. Now, once the cells of interest are collected, they can be used for further analysis. Say for example, it can be used for microscopic studies, biochemical studies, and even functional studies. It could be a single parameter or combination of several parameters can be used for cell sorting. So how do you achieve this cell sorting? To achieve the cell sorting, cell sorters are commonly used. And the general principle of the flow cell sorters is based on the electrostatic deflection of charged droplets which contain the cells. So these droplets, they contain the cells. That means whatever the cells that are present in these droplets, they are deflected electrostatically so that you can sort. And in this method, if you carefully look at the figure, the cells are injected through a nozzle to form a stream of regular droplets. How do you do that? By applying a vibration to the nozzle. So nozzle will be vibrated at a given speed. So then these droplets, they pass through one or more laser beams and they are charged by a charging electrode at the same time. Thus the droplets can be deflected from the main stream based on their given charges. Say for example, the positive charged droplets are deflected towards a platinum plate of negative charge, and the negatively charged droplets are deflected towards the positively charged platinum plate, and uncharged droplets, they are collected directly into the waste container. You got it? So what happens in this method is the cells are injected through a nozzle so that a stream of regular droplets are formed by way of vibrating the nozzle. Then these droplets, they pass through one or more laser beams and they are charged by charging electrode. So as they pass through the laser beams, they are charged simultaneously by a charging electrodes, and then the droplets can be deflected from the mainstream based on their given charges. If the positively charged droplets are deflected, then they are deflected towards a negative charge, that is platinum plate of negative charge, and negatively charged droplets, they are deflected towards the positively charged platinum plate. And if there are uncharged droplets, they are collected into a waste container. FACS, fluorescence assisted cell sorting system, is a specialized type of flow cytometry which provide a method for sorting a heterogeneous mixture of fluorescent tagged cells into two or more container once they are initiated for cell sorting. And the beauty of this technique is it sort the cells. That means one cell at a time is sorted, and this is based on the specific fluorescent characteristics of each cell. And in this case, the operator selects the fluorescent cell of interest using a hardwares as they are passing through the laser beam. So the tagged cells in the drops or the droplets will be charged, which will be used to separate the cells into different collection vessels. Right. So we have studied about different components of the flow cytometry. Now what is the principle of fluorescence? So let us try to understand the fundamental concepts of the fluorescence and fluorochromes, since these are or they form the basis of the flow cytometry. A fluorescent compound has a range of specific wavelengths at which it absorbs light energy. So we all know that. Now this absorption of light causes an electron to rise from a ground state to the excited state or the higher energy level. Now the excited electron quickly goes back to its ground state while giving out the excess energy in the form of a photon, that is as a photon of light. Now this transition of energy is called fluorescence. Now what about fluorochromes and their associated properties? So we know that what is fluorescence. There is an absorption of light which causes an electron to rise from ground state to excited state, and then the electrons quickly goes back to its ground state, liberating the photons of light in the form of excess energy, and this transition of energy is termed the fluorescence. Now what about fluorochromes and their properties? There are a number of intrinsically fluorescent compounds in the cell. The cell has so many compounds which are intrinsically fluorescent, and this is inside the cell, and it is limited as well as its provided information. So we don't have so much of information about the intrinsically fluorescent compounds in the cell. So what to do? Therefore, the cells are usually stained with fluorescent probes called fluorochromes. Though the cells have a number of intrinsically fluorescent compounds, the information what is provided is limited. So the analysis becomes difficult. So the best way is, the cells are stained, they are usually stained with fluorescent probes, and we call these fluorescent probes as fluorochromes. So these fluorochromes are capable to show the presence of components that otherwise would not be visible. So with the help of these fluorochromes, you can see the presence of components that otherwise would not be visible. Now the fluorescent probes, they are used in a wide range of applications. Say for example, in identification of different cell populations, cell surface receptors, or even the intracellular organelles, immunophenotyping, in order to determine the nucleic acid content of a cell, to measure the enzyme activity, and by large the apoptotic cell population studies. So the important features of a fluorochrome include an absorption spectrum at which a fluorescent compound can be excited, and a range of emitted wavelength. We call it as emission spectrum. The emission wavelength of any fluorochrome will always be longer than its excitation wavelength. So most important point to be underlined and remembered. What is the important feature of a fluorochrome? So this fluorochrome include absorption spectrum and then an emission spectrum. What happens in absorption spectrum? A fluorescent compound is excited, and in emission spectrum a range of emitted wavelengths are observed. So the emission wavelength of any fluorochrome will always be longer than its excitation wavelength. The difference between the maxima in the wavelength of absorption and emission is known as the Stokes shift. This determines how good is a fluorochrome. What is Stokes shift? It is the difference between the maxima in the wavelengths of absorption and emission. So this Stokes shift determines how good a fluorochrome is. The higher the Stokes shift means, the greater the separation between the exciting and the emitted light. Reason is, the color of the exciting and emitted light is different, right? Since Stokes shift is the difference between the maxima in the wavelengths of absorption and emission, higher the Stokes shift means the greater the separation between the excited and emitted light, since the color of the excited and emitted light is different, and they can be easily separated from one another by using a simple optical filter. Now the total photons of light being absorbed by the fluorochrome, that is related to the wavelength of excitation, right? Say for example, we have the FITC. This absorbs the light within the range of 400 to 550 nanometer. However, it gives maximum absorbance near 490 nanometer, at which more photons are absorbed. So what is the outcome? The fluorescence emission will be more intense. So these optimal conditions are termed maximal absorbance and maximal emission wavelength, right? So in fluorescence detection, a positive signal is observed against a negative background, which makes this technique very sensitive. So that is the reason this technique, multi-parametric analysis of the cells, is quite possible due to the detection of up to 14 compound fluorescein at different wavelengths. But most of the time, the applications provide the usage of up to 4 fluorochromes. So that is the ideal situation. Okay. Next, we have the fluorochromes that are used in flow cytometry. Fluorochromes are classified, which are used in flow cytometry. They are classified into several groups. It can be used for labeling the proteins, or the fluorochromes for labeling the nucleic acids, and as well as the reporter molecules. So in order to label the proteins covalently, the probe or the fluorochrome is commonly selected is an antibody. For other proteins, say for example, such as lectin, hormones, avidin or streptavidin, or even the cDNA may be labeled using various fluorochromes. So the most widely used fluorochromes for labeling the antibodies include the FITC, the phycoerythrin, we abbreviate it as PE, and we have the allophycocyanin, abbreviated as APC. So PE refers to phycoerythrin and APC refers to allophycocyanin. So the selection of the fluorochrome or the most suitable fluorochrome depends on the laser that is to be used, and it is an important feature too. So if an argon ion laser including flow cytometer is going to be used, the first choice will be the FITC, since there are numerous FITC labeled antibodies available. So whatever the fluorochrome you select or choose, that depends on the type of the laser that is being used. So for phycoerythrin, that is PE, which is a second choice for the similar reasons, and FITC easily reacts with amino groups of the protein's lysine residues, and they produce moderately stable conjugates. So FITC is a good fluorochrome for a single color staining, since I said the maximum absorbance is near 490 nanometers. On the other hand, its emission at longer wavelength makes it inappropriate for multicolor applications. So for single color staining or single color applications, FITC is a very good fluorochrome, because its emission with longer wavelengths, that makes it inappropriate for multicolor applications. And moreover, its fluorescence is highly pH sensitive, and it is also subjected to photo bleaching with a very high rate. Because it is sensitive to pH, a slight variation in the pH results in photo bleaching of the fluorochrome. So that is the limitation of FITC. No doubt, even if FITC is the first choice, it does have these limitations. Number one, emission at longer wavelength, so makes it inappropriate for multicolor applications, and its fluorescence is highly pH sensitive and it is prone to photo bleaching with a higher rate. So how to overcome these issues? To solve these problems, various FITC derivatives have been developed. We have the commercial derivatives of FITC, that is the Alexa series. They have the greater photostability and increased fluorescence. That is one thing. Then we have the tandem dyes. So the development of tandem dyes containing two fluorochromes, which have increased the number of label proteins to be used. Tandem dyes contain two fluorochromes. Till now we were discussing about single fluorochrome, applicable for single color staining as well as multicolor staining. Now we are speaking about use of two fluorochromes. We call this as tandem dyes. So the examples include the conjugates of phycoerythrin and allophycocyanin. So what happens in tandem dyes? When the first dye is excited and it reaches its maximum absorbance, then this transfers all of its energy to the second dye, and this second dye is located in close proximity to the first dye. So what happens? As a result of this, the second fluorochrome is activated and this produces a fluorescence emission. Now this process is called as fluorescence resonance energy transfer, or abbreviated as FRET. So this is a good way to obtain higher Stokes shift that increases the number of colors analyzed from a single laser wavelength. So that is the refinement in the technology, so that the FRET offers higher Stokes shift that increase the number of colors analyzed from a single laser wavelength. So what happens in tandem dyes? The first dye is excited and that reaches its maximal absorbance. It transfers all its energy to the second dye, which is located in close proximity of the first dye. And then as a result of this, this second fluorochrome is activated and this produces the fluorescence emission. So this process of fluorescence transfer, energy transfer, is called as fluorescence resonance energy transfer, or abbreviated as FRET. So this is an important technique which provides higher Stokes shift. Higher Stokes shift means greater the separation between the excited and the emitted light, because the color of the exciting and the emitted light is different. So to repeat, the Stokes shift refer to difference between the maxima in the wavelengths of absorption and emission. So based on the Stokes shift, we can determine how good a fluorochrome is. So I have discussed about the principle of flow cytometry, the components of the flow cytometer in detail, and also the principle of fluorescence and little bit about fluorochromes and their properties. And we did understand about the Stokes shift and then the fluorescence resonance energy transfer process. So I'll stop my discussion over here. In the next session, we can discuss about the applications of flow cytometer. Thank you very much.